There are moments when silence is not weakness, but wisdom dressed in stillness. You've spoken before, haven't you? Words born from kindness, honesty, or love, only to watch them twist into weapons in someone else's hands. You tried to explain your heart, hoping they would see your truth. But instead, they used it to measure your softness, to test how far they could go before you broke. You told them your dreams, and they laughed. You shared your pain, and they turned away. You confessed your love, and they took your devotion as permission to cross your boundaries. So now, you sit with a quiet ache, wondering if silence might have saved you, if stillness might have guarded what words surrendered. There's a warning hidden deep in the ancient wisdom of Machiavelli, not for the rulers of kingdoms, but for the rulers of their own hearts. He whispered truths the world often fears. That goodness without strength invites betrayal. That kindness without clarity becomes a mask for others to exploit. And that silence, when chosen with awareness, is not surrender, but sovereignty. This story is not about cruelty. It's about survival of the spirit, of dignity, of peace. It's about learning when to speak, and when to let your silence speak louder, because there are times when words destroy more than they heal, when the truth is too sacred to hand to those who will trample it, when staying silent is not cowardice, but courage wrapped in grace. In the journey ahead, we'll walk through 10 moments, 10 quiet crossroads, where speaking would cost you your soul, and silence would set you free, not in theory, but in the raw language of experience. The kind of truth you feel in your bones. And if, as you listen, you hear echoes of your own past, of times you gave too much, spoke too soon, or loved too loudly, know this: you are not broken. You are simply not taught the power of silence. If you're ready to see with clearer eyes, to protect what's sacred within you, to choose strength over naive kindness, then stay with me. Breathe. Let's walk this path together. And if these words find you, if they stir something real inside, I invite you to hold them close. Subscribe, share, whisper them to someone who needs them. Because truth, when shared softly, becomes healing. There comes a moment when the first silence must be chosen, when you stand in front of someone you love, someone you trust, and they ask for a piece of your soul you are not ready to give. They want to know your wounds, your secrets, the soft places you've hidden from the world. And because your heart is tender, you feel the pull to open everything. You think, if they see my truth, they'll love me deeper. But not everyone who asks deserves entry. Not everyone who listens carries kindness in their hand. The first time you should stay silent is when your truth is too sacred to be handled by careless souls. When the one in front of you listens only to use what you share, not to hold it with reverence. You've met them, the ones who say, "You can tell me anything," but later use your confessions as weapons in arguments, or as gossip in rooms where you are not present. And afterward, you feel exposed, stripped, foolish for believing that honesty always builds bridges. You thought vulnerability would create intimacy, but sometimes it creates a map for others to hurt you. So now, you must learn this tender strength. Not every truth must be spoken aloud. Some truths are altars meant only for the divine and for the heart that carries them. Some pain finds healing not through explanation, but through quiet understanding. To stay silent is not to hide it, is to honor the parts of you still healing. Machiavelli once warned that the world rewards strength, not innocence. He was not cruel, he was clear. He saw how those who bare their hearts too freely are often crushed beneath the weight of others' ambitions. So silence becomes armor not of steel, but of discernment. You do not owe your story to those who have not earned it. Your silence says, "I know my worth. I will not hand it to those who see me as a tool, not a treasure." You might think silence makes you distant, cold, misunderstood. But it is not distance, it is discernment. You are not rejecting love, you are protecting truth. You are no longer confusing openness with intimacy. You are learning that trust must be tested before it is gifted. In those moments, stay silent. Not out of fear, but out of respect for what your voice carries. Let your quiet become the gatekeeper of your peace. And when loneliness whispers, reminding you of the ache that comes from withholding what longs to be shared, breathe. You are not withholding love. You are preparing for a love that can hold what you offer. The second silence must be chosen when your anger burns hot, when your words rise like fire, and your heart pounds with injustice. You want to shout, to pierce the air with truth, to make them feel the pain they caused. But anger, though righteous, can become a blade that cuts your own skin. In fury, we reveal what should have stayed hidden. We confess weakness. We cry in front of wolves. We hand our enemies the very weapons they'll later use. So, hold your fire. Let silence be your storm. Step back into the stillness where wisdom waits. Because not every battle is worth fighting with words. Some are won through quiet strength, through the calm that confuses those who expected chaos. There is a grace in restraint, a dignity in patience. When you refuse to speak in anger, you reclaim your power. You show them they cannot control your tongue, your emotions, your peace. You teach them that silence is not submission, it is sovereignty. And later, when the flames cool, when your heart steadies, you'll see what silence protected: your self-respect, your clarity, your truth untwisted by rage. The third silence is born in the space between illusion and truth, when your heart longs to speak words that will make them stay, even though you know they've already left in spirit. You feel the distance, the quiet between conversations, the half-hearted glances. You sense the fading, but your mind whispers, if I just say the right thing, they'll remember how it felt to love me. You want to plead, to explain, to remind them of the warmth you gave. But listen closely. If love must be begged for, it has already gone blind. This silence is the hardest, because it feels like surrender. You stand at the edge of a crumbling bridge, holding memories like lifelines, praying that one more confession will bring them back. But the truth is, words cannot resurrect the dead. They only echo through empty halls, haunting the heart that still hopes. So you must stay silent, not because you don't care, but because you've realized your voice cannot awaken what has already chosen to sleep. To speak here would be to betray yourself, to hand your dignity to someone who has forgotten how to hold it. Machiavelli's warning hums beneath your ribs. It is better to be feared than loved if you cannot be both. But this is not about fear, it's about self-respect. It's about understanding that love without honor is just hunger in disguise. You deserve more than someone who listens out of pity. You deserve a love that doesn't need convincing. So you stay silent. You let the emptiness settle. You let them walk away without chasing. Because silence here is your final act of love, not for them, but for yourself. You're not choosing pride. You're choosing peace. You're not withholding emotion. You're protecting the truth that no longer needs to be defended. And in that silence, something miraculous happens. You hear your own voice again, the one buried under all the explaining, apologizing, and pleading. It whispers, "You are enough," even without their validation. You begin to see that the silence you feared is actually freedom, the kind that comes when you stop performing for someone who stopped watching long ago. Then comes the fourth silence, the one that rises in the face of lies, when someone twists your story, paints you as something you are not, and your instinct is to fight back, to shout your innocence to the world. But the truth is, the people who believe lies without question were never meant to hold your truth anyway. Words cannot change the minds already made up by malice. You can spend your life explaining, clarifying, defending, or you can stand still in quiet dignity, letting time reveal what words cannot. Machiavelli might have said to be cunning as the fox and strong as the lion. Here, silence is both. The fox knows the futility of arguing with fools. The lion knows his roar is not needed when his presence alone commands truth. So you stand firm. You stop wasting breath on those who twist your meaning. You walk away not because you have no defense, but because you know your energy is too sacred to be spilled on deaf hearts. In this silence, you reclaim power. You let your actions speak louder than explanations. You let the truth reveal itself in time, because it always does. The lies may echo for a while, but silence, calm, grounded, unwavering, becomes your proof, and the world watches. Some will believe the noise, Others will feel the steadiness of your quiet and know where truth lives. You are not here to convince. You are here to be. The fifth silence arrives when you realize not everyone deserves access to your dreams. You speak them with hope, your eyes shining with possibility, and some will listen only to laugh, dismiss, or plant seeds of doubt. They cannot see your vision because they've never dared to build their own. So they shrink yours to fit their smallness. You walk away doubting yourself, wondering if your dream was foolish. But it wasn't foolish, it was fragile, and you handed it to someone who didn't know how to hold fragile things. So now you learn. Not all dreams need to be spoken. Some must be guarded like seeds in the soil, waiting for the right season to bloom. Silence becomes your garden, your secret place of becoming. You nurture your vision in quiet, away from the noise of disbelief, because dreams grow best where faith is louder than fear. Stay silent, dear one. Not from fear, but from wisdom. Protect what's still growing. Let the world see it only when it's strong enough to stand on its own. The sixth silence is the silence before a storm of apology you no longer owe. You've done this before, carrying guilt that was never yours, whispering, "I'm sorry," just to keep the peace. Even when your heart screamed that peace built on your surrender isn't peace at all, but quiet slavery. You said sorry for being too emotional, too distant, too much, too little, twisting yourself to fit their comfort. And each time you did, a piece of you disappeared into the echo of your own forgiveness. But now, as the urge rises again, the familiar ache to make things right, even when you weren't wrong, pause. Feel the silence pressing gently against your lips. This is not the silence of coldness. It's the silence of awakening. You begin to see that not every conflict is yours to fix, not every disappointment yours to carry. Some people will hand you their brokenness, expecting you to glue it back together with your guilt. But no apology can heal a wound that was never yours to begin with. Machiavelli spoke of strength, of choosing clarity over illusion. And clarity, here is this: love cannot be sustained by one person's endless surrender. So you stay silent, not because you are proud, but because you have finally learned the difference between humility and self-erasure. You no longer bow to keep someone else standing. You no longer soften truth to avoid rejection. Your silence says, "I see what's mine and what's not. I return to myself what I once gave away." There's a strange freedom in not explaining, not begging to be understood, in trusting that your integrity speaks louder than words ever could. Let them misunderstand. Let them walk away with their version. You no longer trade your peace for validation. The seventh silence whispers through the spaces where your worth is questioned. You've met those who see your kindness and mistake it for weakness, who test your boundaries to see how far they can go. They ask for more than they give, take more than they honor. And you, hoping to be loved, hoping to be enough, have given and given, until your hands trembled with emptiness. But now, you know, love without respect is hunger dressed as affection. And silence, in the face of disrespect, is not avoidance, it is revelation. You don't need to fight to prove your worth. You don't need to shout, "I deserve better." You show it by walking away without a word, by letting the door close gently behind you, by refusing to argue with someone who already decided you were less. In that silence, power blooms quiet, steady, unshakable. You no longer chase. You no longer explain. You let your absence say what your voice no longer needs to. Because sometimes, the loudest truth is the one spoken through stillness. And then, the eighth silence, the one that comes when you see through illusion, when your heart wants to believe the best in people, to give them another chance, another excuse, another tomorrow. You remember their pain, their promises, their tears. You want to think they'll change, but deep inside, you know the truth. They've shown you who they are, and to keep hoping is to betray yourself. So you stay silent, not from bitterness, but from clarity. You no longer argue with potential. You honor reality. You stop painting angels over demons. You stop rewriting the story just to feel safe. You see people not as you wish they were, but as they are. And your silence says, "I choose truth over fantasy. I choose peace over longing. The ninth silence arrives in the quiet space between your heart and the world. When you realize that not every feeling needs to be announced, not every emotion needs an audience. You've poured yourself out before, haven't you? Hoping that someone, somewhere, would see the depth of your care and respond with the same tenderness. You've spoken your love in 1,000 ways, through words, through gestures, through sacrifices no one ever asked for. Yet still, there were moments when all that giving left you hollow. You believed that to love meant to express, to confess, to keep proving. But now you begin to see, love is not louder when spoken sometimes. It's stronger when held in silence. Because love that demands to be witnessed often becomes a performance. And you are done performing. Machiavelli once said that fortune favors the bold, and here, boldness means restraint. To feel deeply but not always speak. To know your heart but not hand it to every passerby. You no longer confuse noise with sincerity, or attention with care. There is beauty in the quiet devotion that doesn't beg to be seen, in the affection that blooms without applause. So you stay silent when your love is real, but the world isn't ready. You honor your feelings without needing them validated. You hold them gently, like a secret prayer whispered only to the heavens. This silence is not loneliness, it is sacredness. It's the understanding that some things grow best when kept close, untouched by the world's noise. Then comes the final silence, the 10th, the most powerful of all. The silence you choose when truth has spoken enough. When there is nothing left to explain, no more proof to give, no more battles to fight. It is the silence of self-respect. The silence of one who has seen enough, felt enough, and now simply is. You've learned that strength is not in shouting your worth, but in standing quietly in it. That clarity doesn't need convincing. That the loudest voice in any room is often the one that says nothing, because silence commands attention where noise begs for it. Here, in this silence, you find yourself. Not the version shaped by others' expectations, not the one molded by fear or hunger, but the one that has always been waiting, strong, still, sovereign. You look back and see the times you spoke when you should have waited, the wounds that came from explaining yourself to the wrong people, the exhaustion from giving words to hearts that never wanted to understand. But now, you know better. You understand the cost of every word, the power of every pause, and so you walk forward differently. You speak less, but when you do, your voice carries truth. You choose silence, not because you are afraid, but because you are free. In this quiet, there is power. In this quiet, there is peace. In this quiet, there is you whole, awake, untamed. You've been quiet lately, haven't you? Not because you've run out of words, but because it feels like no one hears them anymore. You show up, you care, you give, yet somehow, you fade into the background. You're there in the room, but unseen. You speak, and the world hums past you as if your voice were made of air. And so, you start to question yourself. Maybe you're too soft. Maybe your kindness has made you invisible. You believe that being good, truly good, would protect you. That if you gave love freely, it would come back. That if you were understanding, people would understand you. But here you are, exhausted, heart heavy, wondering why the world seems to reward indifference more than sincerity. You keep asking yourself, what's wrong with me? But what if nothing is wrong with you at all? What if you've just been living by a script that was never meant to serve your soul? A script that told you to bend, to please, to always forgive even when your spirit screamed for respect. A script that mistook silence for peace, surrender for love. Let me whisper something to you softly, but truthfully. You were never meant to disappear just to be loved. You were meant to rise, to see clearly, to walk in truth, not illusion. And the truth is this: not everyone deserves your kindness. Not everyone sees your light. Some only notice when it starts to burn them. This isn't about becoming cold or cruel. It's about remembering your worth, the kind that doesn't beg to be seen. It's about learning that strength isn't the opposite of love. It's what protects it. It's what keeps you whole in a world that often confuses softness with weakness. So tonight, or whenever your heart needs it, let these words be your quiet rebirth, a journey back to your core, where self-respect breathes louder than fear, and love begins with truth. If you've been ignored, dismissed, taken for granted, this is for you. We'll walk together through the illusions, through the masks people wear, through the ache of being unseen, until you rise, not bitter, but wise, until you become both lion and fox, brave enough to stand tall, wise enough to see clearly. Because healing doesn't mean returning to who you were before the pain. It means becoming who you were meant to be because of it. And if these words touch something inside, you stay. Let's go deeper together. You don't have to heal alone. If you feel something awakening, a spark, a whisper, a small yes, subscribe. Not out of habit, but as a promise to yourself that from this moment you'll choose truth over illusion, clarity over fantasy, strength over self-erasure. You deserve to be seen. You deserve to rise. You gave too much, didn't you? Because deep down, you thought that love was earned through patience, through sacrifice, through silence. You believed that if you were kind enough, forgiving enough, soft enough, someone would finally choose you. So you waited. You endured. You told yourself, if I just hold on, they'll see my worth. But they didn't. And now, you're tired. Tired of proving your heart. Tired of being the one who understands, who bends, who holds space for others while no one holds space for you. It hurts, doesn't it? The ache of being invisible in the very places you poured your soul into. The quiet shame of realizing that the love you gave so freely was never returned in full. But listen, this isn't your punishment. It's your awakening. Because the world, as it is, doesn't always reward goodness. It rewards clarity. It honors those who know their value and guard it fiercely. You see, kindness without boundaries becomes a wound. Forgiveness without discernment becomes a chain. Love without self-respect becomes surrender, not grace. You were never meant to be endlessly gentle. You were meant to be whole, to carry both light and fire, to know when to give and when to step back, to see people not as your heart wishes them to be, but as they truly are. That's not cynicism, it's wisdom, because love without truth is illusion, and illusion is the birthplace of pain. They told you to always be good, but they never told you that some will use your goodness as a mirror to avoid their own shadows. They'll take your empathy as an invitation to cross your lines. They'll call you selfish the moment you choose yourself, and for a while, you'll believe them, because you've been taught that love means giving, even when it costs you peace. But real love, the kind that heals instead of wounds, begins with respect. The kind that says, I will not shrink to be loved. I will not beg to be seen. You don't need to harden. You only need to see. See the truth, even when it's uncomfortable. See the difference between love and longing, between attention and affection, between presence and pretense. When you begin to see clearly, the fog of confusion lifts. You stop chasing what doesn't nourish you. You stop apologizing for being strong. You stop mistaking loneliness for loyalty. You learn that silence can be sacred, not a sentence. You learn that walking away can be the highest form of love for yourself. And slowly, something shifts. You no longer give just to be noticed. You no longer bend just to belong. You begin to build your life not around who left, but around who you're becoming. A soul reborn fierce, gentle, awake. You will lose people in this process, but you'll gain yourself. And that is a trade worth everything. So breathe. You're not broken. You're emerging from the ashes of old stories. You are writing a new one where you are not the background, but the center, not the echo, but the voice, not the forgotten, but the remembered. And if your heart trembles at the thought of letting go, know this. Courage is not the absence of fear. It's walking through it with truth in your hands. Because fortune and peace favor the bold. There was a time when you believed love would save you. You thought if you gave enough, forgave enough, endured enough, they would finally see you. You waited for the day they'd turn around, eyes soft with recognition, whispering, I'm sorry, I see you now. But that day never came, because some people don't see love as a gift, they see it as fuel. And when your fire burns too bright for them, they turn away, afraid of their own reflection in your light. You mistook their silence for depth, their coldness for mystery, their absence for a test. You thought if you stayed, if you loved harder, they'd return what you gave. But love is not a transaction, and what you offered, honesty, softness, loyalty, was never meant to be bartered with those who only know how to take. So you began to fade, didn't you? You learned to dim your laughter, to measure your words, to swallow your needs. You told yourself, "It's okay, I don't need much." But deep inside, your soul cried for something real, for love that didn't make you disappear. You believed that goodness would shield you from harm, that if your intentions were pure, the world would respond with gentleness. But life, in its strange and brutal beauty, doesn't always reward the kind. It teaches them. It breaks the illusion that kindness alone can keep you safe. There's a truth you must face, even if it stings. Not everyone who smiles at you wishes you well. Not everyone who takes your hand intends to hold your heart. Some are drawn to your light because it fills the darkness they refuse to heal. And when they've taken enough, they leave, leaving you questioning if your love was too much. But your love was never the problem. Your blindness was. Your refusal to see that not everyone deserves access to your soul. Your hope that love could fix what truth could not. You must learn to see. To see people not through your longing, but through their actions. To watch how they treat your silence, your vulnerability, your absence. Because real love won't vanish when you speak your truth. It won't punish you for having boundaries. It won't ask you to choose between being loved and being yourself. And when you finally open your eyes fully, bravely the world shifts. You stop begging to be chosen. You start choosing yourself. You begin to move with quiet power, not to prove, not to chase, but to live. You walk with the strength of someone who knows that love without respect is an illusion. And truth, no matter how painful, is the purest form of love you can give yourself. Yes, some will call you cold now. They'll say you've changed, but they only say that because they can no longer feed on your softness. What they call cold is clarity. What they call distance is dignity. What they call selfish is survival. You're not here to please. You're here to live in truth, to love wisely, to walk with courage, to honor your heart without letting it be a doorway for those who don't know how to enter gently. So let the old story die. The one where you wait to be seen, the one where you trade pieces of yourself for scraps of affection. You don't need to be rescued. You only need to wake up. You are not invisible. You've simply been standing in the wrong light. Now step into your own. There comes a moment quiet, almost invisible, when you realize you're done explaining yourself. You stop begging for understanding from those who were never listening. You stop softening your truth just to keep the peace. You stop chasing people who are at peace with your absence. This is not bitterness. This is rebirth. It's the stillness that comes after the storm, when the winds of overgiving finally settle, and all that's left is you, raw, honest, awake. You look around and notice how much of your life has been built on pleasing others. The choices you made to be loved, the words you swallowed to avoid being left, the parts of you buried just to fit into someone else's comfort. And suddenly, it all feels heavy, the pretending, the hoping, the endless adjusting. You wonder, what would happen if I stopped? If you stopped chasing what doesn't choose you? If you stopped proving your worth? If you stopped apologizing for being too much, too quiet, too deep? What would happen if you simply existed fully, fiercely, truthfully? You might lose some people, but the ones who remain will see you, not the mask, not the version molded by fear, but the real you. The one who speaks truth even when her voice shakes. The one who walks away from half-love, from fake smiles, from places where her spirit can't breathe. You start to understand that strength is not loud. It's not revenge, or coldness, or walls. It's the quiet certainty that you deserve peace, that your heart is not a bargain, and your time is not a gift for those who do not honor it. You begin to see people clearly now, not through the haze of hope, but through the mirror of reality. You see who shows up when there's nothing left to take. You see who listens when you speak from your soul. You see who stays when you no longer bend. And in that clarity, you find power. Not the kind that dominates, but the kind that liberates. You no longer need to be loved by everyone because you are rooted in self-respect. You no longer fear being alone because solitude is no longer emptiness. but sanctuary. You no longer seek validation because your truth is enough. This is what it means to be both lion and fox, to walk through the world with courage and wisdom, to roar when necessary, to move in silence when it's wise, to protect your heart without hardening it, to love without losing yourself. The world may still try to test you. There will be moments when your old habits whisper, "Maybe if I'm nicer, they'll stay." But now, you'll catch that voice. You'll hold it gently and remind it you don't have to beg to be seen. You don't have to prove your value to anyone who cannot feel it. You are not a lesson for others to learn too late. You are the one who learns now, here, in this sacred pause. You learn that truth is the highest form of love, even when it breaks illusions. You learn that peace costs the version of you who settled for less. You learn that rebirth is not becoming new, it's becoming real. So stand tall, not to be admired, but to be free. Let your silence speak where words once pleaded. Let your eyes reflect the clarity you've earned. You are not ignored anymore because you no longer ignore yourself. And when the world sees you steady, glowing, unafraid, it will wonder what changed. But only you will know. You stopped chasing shadows and chose the Sunday. You stopped waiting to be chosen and chose yourself. You stopped seeking love in others and became the love you needed all along. There's a strange peace that arrives when you finally stop running, not away from others, but from yourself, from the quiet ache of unmet needs, from the voice that whispered, "I'm not enough." For so long, you tried to fill the emptiness with approval, with attention, with love that always came with conditions. You mistook being needed for being cherished. You mistook tolerance for affection. You thought if you just became perfect, softer, quieter, easier, someone would stay. But now you see it. The people who ignored you were teaching you to stop ignoring yourself. The ones who withheld love were showing you where you still begged for it. The moments that shattered you were breaking the illusions that kept you small. You thought strength meant holding on, but real strength is letting go, not with bitterness, but with reverence. It's the courage to close the door gently and whisper, "Thank you for the lesson." It's the quiet defiance of no longer settling for half-hearted love. You've been through fire, and though it burned, it refined you. It stripped away the illusions, the masks, the stories that told you to shrink. Now, what remains is something unbreakable. A soul that no longer confuses suffering with loyalty. A heart that loves deeply, but not at the cost of its own pulse. A spirit that walks alone, not in loneliness, but in truth. You've learned that love is not meant to be begged for, it's meant to be mirrored. You've learned that kindness without self-respect is self-betrayal. You've learned that being good is not about being agreeable, it's about being whole. You begin to walk differently now, not rushed, not desperate, each step grounded in clarity. You no longer search faces for validation, you carry your worth within. You no longer shapeshift to fit rooms, you bring your own presence. You no longer chase after those who leave you, let them. Because what is meant for you will recognize your light. It won't demand you dim it. And slowly, people will notice the shift. They'll say, "You've changed," and you have. You've stopped being the echo of others' desires and become the voice of your own truth. You no longer confuse silence with peace or absence with love. You no longer pour into empty cups. You protect your energy like a sacred flame, warm, bright, and untouchable by those who come only to take. This is your psychological rebirth, not born from anger, but from awakening. You've learned that softness is not weakness when paired with strength, that compassion is not foolishness when guided by clarity, that being feared is not your goal, but being respected is your right. And in this new life, you don't hide your heart, you honor it. You love still, but wisely. You forgive, but don't return to what broke you. You give, but never at the cost of your peace. You stand steady and serene in the truth that you are enough, not because someone says so, but because you finally believe it. This is the art of seeing, of living with eyes wide open, of walking as both lion and fox, fierce yet discerning, bold yet wise, of choosing truth, even when it's hard, because illusion may comfort, but it never frees. And one day, you'll look back and realize the ones who ignored you gave you a gift. They taught you the sacred power of your own presence. They pushed you into the silence where you finally met yourself, and that meeting changed everything. So breathe. Now, The war is over. You have returned home to your truth, to your strength, to your peace. If these words find you where you are hurting, healing, awakening, let them stay. Let them remind you that your story is still being written. And this time, you hold the pen. If you feel the spark, the stirring, the quiet, yes within, stay close. Subscribe not just to a channel, but to a new way of being. Like, share, speak not for numbers, but for souls like yours, still waiting in the dark, needing to hear this truth. You were never invisible. You were only waiting to see yourself. They didn't respect you because you were kind. They liked you, maybe, admired your patience, your softness, your willingness to understand, but they didn't respect you. Respect doesn't come from how much you give. It comes from how much you refuse to lose yourself while giving. You thought that being good would protect you. You thought that if you were gentle enough, forgiving enough, people would finally see your worth, but they only saw what they could take from you. You became the one who always says, "It's okay," even when it wasn't. The one who stayed longer than you should have. The one who smiled through betrayal just to prove you weren't bitter. And one day, you realized the truth that burned quietly beneath all your efforts. You were never asking to be respected. You were begging not to be abandoned. It's not your fault. You learned to survive by pleasing others. You learned to earn love by shrinking yourself. But there comes a moment when the exhaustion becomes heavier than the fear. When you stop asking, "What did I do wrong?" and start whispering, "Why did I let them?" In this moment, something changes. Not loudly, not with anger, but with clarity. You start to see that respect is not something you can demand. It's something that grows in the silence of your certainty, when you no longer perform to be seen, when you no longer chase to be chosen. Tonight, I want to talk to the part of you that's tired of pretending to be good just to feel safe. The part that has been invisible for too long. The part that still wants to believe that goodness and strength can live in the same heart, because they can. But you must learn to be both lion and fox, to move with courage and to think with clarity. You don't need to raise your voice to command respect. You just need to stop lowering your standards to keep the peace. The power you've been searching for has been waiting for you in your stillness, in your silence, in your refusal to explain yourself to those who never cared to understand. So stay with me. Breathe. We're going to talk about how to make people respect you, not by forcing them, not by pretending to be strong, but by remembering who you are when you stop begging for permission to exist. And before we go deeper, take a moment to breathe and subscribe so you never forget to return to this space, where truth feels like healing and courage sounds like peace. There's a quiet kind of power in people who have finally stopped chasing approval. You can feel it before they even speak. The stillness, the unshakable calm, the way they look at you without the need to prove anything. They have been broken before. They have begged before. But now, they simply know. And knowing changes everything. You might not realize it yet, but your kindness was never the problem. What hurt you was how you used it as currency, as a shield, as a way to keep people close who were never meant to stay. You gave love as proof of your worth. You forgave to keep the peace, even when that peace cost your self-respect. You became soft because you thought softness was safe, but safety built on silence always turns into a cage. Respect doesn't grow in cages. It blooms in boundaries. When you start saying no, not as a rebellion, but as a declaration of self, something shifts around you. The people who once took your silence as agreement begin to feel uncomfortable. They call you cold. They say you've changed. But you haven't. You've simply stopped apologizing for being alive. You stop explaining why you can't always be there. You stop shrinking when someone misunderstands you. You stop feeling guilty for being unavailable to those who were never available to you. And that's when you begin to earn respect, the kind that doesn't need to be asked for. Because people can sense it when you finally decide that your peace matters more than their approval. It unsettles them. It awakens something ancient and powerful in you, the awareness that you are no longer a servant to other people's comfort. You begin to see the world as it truly is, not as you wish it to be. You stop confusing affection for loyalty. You stop mistaking flattery for sincerity. You start noticing how often people speak of love while acting out of fear. And in that clarity, you grow quieter, sharper, wiser. That's the essence of real influence, not in controlling others, but in mastering your own energy. The way you walk into a room when you no longer need to be liked carries more gravity than any speech. It's not arrogance. It's self-possession. It's the lion's walk measured, aware, unhurried. The world respects what moves with purpose, and yet, this power must be paired with subtlety. Being all lion will make you rigid. Being only fox will make you untrustworthy. You need both the courage to stand alone and the cleverness to see through masks without bitterness. This balance doesn't make you manipulative. It makes you clear. You stop judging others for who they pretend to be and start learning from what their actions reveal. Machiavelli once said, "It is better to be feared than loved if you cannot be both." But here, fear doesn't mean intimidation. It means boundaries that cannot be crossed. It means people know there's a line between your kindness and your tolerance. It means your love has roots, not just petals. When people sense that, they adjust. Not because you ask them to, but because your presence requires it. That's the secret of influence. It's not about convincing anyone. It's about embodying a truth so deeply that others cannot deny it, so you keep walking quietly. You don't argue when someone underestimates you. You let your actions rewrite their assumptions. You let time prove what words never could. Slowly, people who once overlooked you start to listen when you speak. They lean in not because you demanded their attention, but because you stopped giving it away so freely. And in that moment, you begin to understand something sacred. You don't have to make people respect you. You just have to stop trying to earn what should have been freely given. Respect follows those who have learned to walk away. If this truth is finding its way into you tonight, let it stay. Let it settle where your heart once ached for validation. And when you're ready, share it, because someone else out there is still trying to be loved by people who will never see them. They need to hear this too. There comes a point when you begin to see how much of your suffering was never caused by cruelty, but by illusion. You believed people saw you the way you saw them. You believed your goodness could inspire their honesty. You believed if you just kept loving hard enough, you could soften their edges. But people rarely rise to meet your love. They sink to the level of their own self-awareness. And when they do, you call it betrayal. Yet it's only truth revealed too late. Seeing people as they are, not as you wish them to be, is the hardest kind of awakening. It feels like losing faith in humanity, when in truth, it's finding clarity about it. You realize that not everyone wants peace. Not everyone values loyalty. Some people feed on control, some on pity, some on the power of being needed. You start to understand that being good to them is not a bridge, it's bait. And so, you begin the painful work of unlearning your illusions. You stop making excuses for others' carelessness. You stop telling yourself they didn't mean it. You start accepting that sometimes they did. They meant every silence, every absence, every half-truth wrapped in charm. And that's okay, not because it's right, but because it's real. Clarity hurts at first, but then it heals deeper than hope ever could. When you stop expecting people to be noble, you stop feeling betrayed when they're not. That's the strange relief of maturity. It's not cynicism, it's realism wrapped in compassion. You learn to forgive without reopening the door. You wish people well without wishing them back. You let them be exactly who they are, and in doing so, you finally become who you were always meant to be. Someone who sees clearly and still chooses peace. This clarity doesn't make you cold, it makes you free. You start protecting your time like it's sacred. You start speaking less, but meaning more. You no longer rush to explain yourself to those who twist your words. You no longer beg to be understood by those committed to misunderstanding you. You choose silence over argument, distance over resentment, truth over fantasy. And with that comes respect, the real kind. Because people feel it when you've seen through them and still remain calm. They sense that you no longer dance for crumbs of affection. They know you won't chase. That unsettles them more than anger ever could. You've become unreadable, untouchable in a way that only self-respect can create. This is what it means to embody quiet strength. It's not about dominating others. It's about no longer being dominated by your own longing. It's the art of standing still when everyone else is performing. It's the grace of knowing when to walk away, not to punish, but to protect what's sacred within you. Machiavelli would say, "The world belongs to those who dare to see it as it is, not as they want it to be." But you, in your tenderness, bring a deeper wisdom to that idea. You understand that seeing the truth isn't an act of cruelty, it's an act of love. Because truth is what sets you free from the exhausting cycle of illusion and disappointment. Truth is what allows you to stop fixing people and start saving yourself. You begin to live differently. You move slower. You listen more. You stop volunteering your soul to those who haven't earned it. You stop rushing to heal others before they're ready. You stop trying to prove that your heart deserves to be handled carefully. You simply become careful with your time, your energy, your love, and slowly, everything around you begins to shift. The ones who used to dismiss you start watching you with quiet confusion. They can't quite name it, but they feel the difference. The softness is still there, but now it has edges. The warmth is still real, but now it burns instead of begging. You have become something rare, kind, but unyielding, gentle, but grounded, compassionate, but clear. This is how you make people respect you without asking them to. You stop performing for their comfort and start living for your truth. Respect doesn't need applause. It needs presence. It grows in the space between what you know and what you no longer tolerate. And if your heart is whispering right now that it's tired of illusions, listen to it. Let truth hurt you once, instead of lies hurting you forever. If this feels like you, if you've been the one who always forgives, always explains, always stays too long, then maybe tonight is your turning point. Maybe tonight is the first time you stop explaining your worth and start embodying it. Breathe with me. Stay here. Let's keep going. There is a strange kind of loneliness that comes after you choose self-respect. You expect liberation, and yes, it comes, but it doesn't arrive with applause. It comes quietly, with distance. The very people you once tried to please begin to fade, one by one. Some leave without a word. Others try to pull you back into their gravity. They say you've changed, and they're right. You've stopped orbiting around their comfort. You're standing still now, in your own light, and it's blinding to those who only knew you dim. This loneliness isn't punishment. It's purification. It's the silence between who you were and who you're becoming. And though it aches, it's the ache of strength returning to your spine. For so long, you mistook acceptance for love. You thought that being easy to be around would keep you close to others. You made yourself small, soft, endlessly forgiving. You bit your tongue so they could feel comfortable. You gave second chances to those who never offered you a first. And for a while, it worked. You were loved, at least, as long as you were useful. But love that depends on your silence isn't love. It's convenience. Real respect begins the moment you risk being disliked. The moment you stop performing goodness and start practicing truth. The moment you say, "I can't keep doing this," even when it makes the room go cold. The moment you stop choosing peace that costs your dignity. That's when you start to become dangerous, not because you're cruel, but because you're no longer controlled. The kind of person who smiles but no longer explains, who listens but no longer absorbs, who walks away without bitterness, without turning back. People can sense it. They feel the power of someone who no longer fears being alone. Because once you stop fearing solitude, the world loses its grip on you. You begin to see how often people weaponize your empathy, how often they rely on your forgiveness to escape accountability. You start to feel that being kind doesn't mean being naive. Kindness with clarity becomes strength. Kindness with blindness becomes self-destruction. And you, dear listener, you have carried enough bruises from misunderstanding the two. The world often tells you that being good will bring good things. But the truth is, the world respects what it cannot manipulate. That's why the quiet, self-assured souls stand out. They don't need to prove their worth or shout for attention. They've learned to protect their energy the way one guards a flame in the wind. Not with fear, but with reverence. There's a line somewhere between love and self-erasure, and you are learning to find it. You are learning that no can be a holy word, that walking away can be an act of faith, that your silence, once used to keep peace, can now be used to keep power. Because sometimes, the most powerful thing you can say is nothing at all. You'll notice that when you start respecting yourself, not everyone celebrates you. Some will call you distant. Others will accuse you of arrogance. But what they really mean is that they miss the version of you who let them cross lines without consequence. And that version is gone. She's resting now. He's done performing. They have become someone new, someone unrecognizable to those who only valued their weakness. You will grieve that version of yourself. You will miss the innocence of believing that love alone could heal what hurt you. But you will also breathe easier. You'll notice that the air feels cleaner without all that pretending. You'll stop analyzing texts that never deserved your attention. You'll stop rehearsing apologies for simply existing. And in that silence, in that newfound emptiness, something magnificent happens. You start hearing yourself again. The voice that once whispered, "Maybe I'm not enough," begins to shift. It becomes softer, steadier. It begins to say, "Maybe they just weren't ready for someone like me. And eventually, I don't need them to be." That's the turning point. The rebirth. The moment when the need for validation dissolves and all that remains is truth. Your truth. You'll find yourself walking through the world differently. You'll start to move with a quiet confidence that doesn't announce itself. People will feel it in the way you hold eye contact, in the way you no longer rush to fill silences, in the way you smile with calm rather than nervousness. They won't know what changed, but you will. You stopped begging to be understood. You started choosing to be whole. And from that wholeness, influence begins not because you control others, but because you inspire boundaries in them. People start treating you with care not out of fear, but out of recognition. They sense they're in the presence of someone who cannot be owned, someone who values peace more than approval. That's the paradox of respect. The less you seek it, the more it finds you. Because when you finally decide that your worth is not a democracy, the world adjusts its tone. If you feel this truth sitting heavy in your chest tonight, don't rush past it. Let it move through you. Let it remind you that every act of self-respect is a declaration of love, the kind of love that doesn't leave you empty. And if this is touching something raw inside you, pause for a moment, breathe, and share it with someone who needs this reminder too. Someone who's still learning that it's okay to stop apologizing for outgrowing their cage. The moment you begin to carry yourself differently, the world notices before you even do. You start to walk slower, not because you're tired, but because you're no longer rushing toward anyone's approval. Your silence becomes full instead of empty. Your eyes start saying what your mouth no longer bothers to explain. You're not angry anymore. You're awake. And awakening is both lonely and liberating. You start realizing how many of your conversations used to be transactions, how much of your laughter was a mask for discomfort, how often your compassion was mistaken for consent. You look back and see how you used to contort yourself into whatever shape would make others stay, and you grieve. Because the person you used to be, the one who tried so hard, was pure. They loved with everything they had. But purity without boundaries is an open wound, and you are no longer willing to bleed to keep others warm. You now understand what it means to be both lion and fox. The lion teaches you courage to roar when it's time, to stand firm when the ground shakes, to hold your gaze when others look away. But the fox teaches you wisdom to watch quietly, to move strategically, to understand that not every truth needs to be spoken. Together, they make you whole. One gives you the power to command your space. The other gives you the grace to navigate the world without losing yourself. You begin to see that strength isn't about force, it's about discernment. Knowing when to fight and when to disappear. Knowing when to speak and when silence says more. Knowing that you owe no one constant access to your energy. You can love people deeply and still choose distance. You can forgive them and still protect your peace. You can care and still say no. That's not cruelty, that's clarity. There's a particular kind of beauty in someone who is kind but not naive, who can open their heart without offering it for sacrifice, who can walk away with grace instead of resentment. That beauty carries weight, it commands attention. Not the kind that seeks validation, but the kind that draws quiet respect. Because people sense balance when they see it. They respect what doesn't need to prove itself. The world tries to convince you that to be respected, you must be feared. But fear fades. What lasts is the energy of someone who knows their worth and honors it. Respect, real respect, doesn't come from making people afraid to lose you. It comes from being unafraid to lose them. That's what makes you magnetic. You are no longer asking for permission to be yourself. You're no longer performing humility to make others comfortable. You are both softness and steel. You don't chase, you attract. Not because you're playing a game, but because your peace has become sacred. People can feel that. They can sense when they're in the presence of someone who cannot be manipulated, who has made peace with solitude, who has built a home inside their own heart. And yet, this strength isn't loud. It doesn't need to be. It doesn't demand. It simply is. You've learned that the loudest power often hides behind quiet eyes. You've learned that saying less makes your words heavier. You've learned that you can walk into any room and say nothing and still shift the atmosphere. Because real power doesn't announce itself. It radiates. You've become untouchable in the most peaceful way. Not because you're guarded, but because you're grounded. You've stopped needing to win arguments. You've stopped chasing closure from those who never offered honesty. You've stopped trying to fix people who enjoy being broken. You've chosen truth over illusion. And it has cost you many things, but not your soul. You'll lose people, yes, but you'll gain presence. You'll lose chaos, but you'll gain peace. You'll lose noise, but you'll find music in silence. And that's when you realize, respect isn't about being loved. It's about being remembered for your integrity. When you start living like this, people might whisper about how different you've become. They'll say you've changed, and you'll smile because that's the point. You're not who you were when you tolerated disrespect just to feel seen. You're not who you were when you mistook attention for affection. You've evolved into someone who understands that real love cannot exist without self-respect. You've stopped asking, "Why don't they value me?" Now you ask, "Why did I?" And that question changes everything. That's when you start moving through the world like water fluid. Calm, unstoppable. You no longer resist what leaves. You no longer chase what's gone. You trust that what belongs to you will know how to find you. And it will not because you demand it, but because you've become the kind of person people can't forget. You, my listener, are learning the rarest form of influence, the kind that doesn't need an audience, the kind that leaves a mark long after the conversation ends, the kind that comes from walking through the world with quiet dignity and a heart too wise to be deceived again. And if your heart is nodding in silence right now, if this feels like truth wrapped in calm, share it with someone who needs to hear it. Someone still trying to be understood by those who refuse to listen. Maybe you can be the reason they finally remember their worth. At some point, the war within you will end. You will no longer battle between being kind and being respected, between being loved and being whole. You will understand that the two can live together, but only when you choose yourself first. And when that realization finally settles in your chest, everything becomes quieter. The noise fades. The ache softens. You begin to breathe differently. You no longer look for validation in the eyes of others. You no longer measure your worth by who stays or who leaves. You begin to love yourself in a way that no longer depends on how anyone else sees you. That's the deepest form of freedom, to stand in your truth, unshaken, knowing that respect starts where self-abandonment ends. You realize that the people who are meant for you will never require you to shrink. They will see your calm as strength, not coldness. They will admire your boundaries, not resent them. They will meet your honesty with their own. You won't have to chase them, fix them, or beg them to understand you. You will simply align with those who speak the same quiet language of integrity and courage. And that's when life begins to feel effortless again. Not because it's easy, but because it's real. You stop pretending. You stop performing. You start living from truth instead of fear. You become someone who doesn't just survive, love you, lead it. By example, people will respect you, not because you demanded it, but because you've become undeniable. You've become both lion and fox, courage wrapped in calm, wisdom wrapped in grace. You don't roar anymore, because your silence says everything. You don't chase anymore, because what's meant for you moves toward your stillness. And that's the quiet brilliance of it all. The moment you stop needing respect is the moment you start receiving it. If you're listening to this with a soft ache in your heart, take this as a sign. You don't need to prove your worth anymore. You've already earned it by surviving, by growing, by refusing to stay small. So breathe, stand tall, and when someone asks you what changed, just smile and say, I remembered who I am. If these words touched something deep inside you, stay with this energy. Let it guide you. And when you're ready, share it. Not out of obligation, but out of love. Because someone out there is still giving too much, still begging to be seen, still forgetting that they are already enough. Remind them, and come back here when you need to remember too. Subscribe. Stay close. Keep healing. This isn't the end. It's the beginning of your power. There comes a moment when your heart grows tired of pretending that love will fix everything. You smile, but inside, there's a silence that feels like winter, long, cold, and endless. You've given pieces of yourself away to people who never held them gently. You've tried to stay soft in a world that rewards the sharp. You've mistaken surrender for strength and kindness for protection. But all it did was drain you, and now, you're standing at the edge of your own exhaustion, whispering the question you never dared to say aloud: how do I let go of everything that weakens me? You see, people often tell you to stay good, stay kind, stay loving, but they never warn you that goodness, when misplaced, becomes a weapon turned inward. They never tell you that sometimes the kindest souls are the ones most used, most unseen, most betrayed. You thought being selfless would make you loved, but all it did was make you small, invisible, replaceable. There's a quiet kind of cruelty in how the world works. The ones who love deeply are often the ones left empty. The ones who give endlessly are left with nothing. And yet, there's a truth waiting inside this pain. A truth Machiavelli might whisper if he saw you breaking in the dark. You must learn to be cold, not cruel, detached, not heartless. Because detachment is not the absence of love. It's the presence of self-respect. Imagine this. What if your softness could coexist with strength? What if you could still love, but no longer lose yourself in the process? What if you stopped chasing approval and started walking in truth, even if it meant walking alone for a while? That's where freedom begins. That's where your power returns. Because the world doesn't respect those who beg for love. It respects those who no longer need it to feel whole. Tonight, let's talk about how to let go not of love, but of illusions. How to stop mistaking your wounds for your worth. How to see clearly, even when your heart trembles. How to rise from the ashes of overgiving and stand tall in quiet strength. This isn't about becoming cold-hearted. It's about becoming unshakable. You're not meant to be feared, you're meant to be respected. You're not here to please, you're here to live. So breathe. Stay with me. This might hurt a little, but it will set you free. And if these words touch something deep in you, if they remind you of your own strength, softly subscribe, share, or leave your truth in the comments. Someone out there might need your courage. You gave too much because you feared being left behind. You thought love was something you could earn, like a prize for your patience, your forgiveness, your endless ability to stay. You waited for someone to see your worth, believing that if you were good enough, quiet enough, loyal enough, they would finally choose you. But they didn't. And deep down, you knew they never would. That's the first illusion, the belief that goodness guarantees love. It doesn't. The world isn't kind just because you are. People don't stay because you give them everything. Some take your softness as permission. Some confuse your empathy with weakness. And some, seeing that you'll never walk away, will stop trying to meet you halfway. You believed that love meant sacrifice, that to keep someone, you had to lose a little more of yourself each day. You thought silence was strength, That understanding was enough to fill the empty spaces between you. But love built on fear isn't love, it's survival dressed in longing. And the moment you start trading your peace for someone's presence, you begin to disappear. Machiavelli once said, "It is better to be feared than loved if you cannot be both." People often hear that as cruelty, but it's not. It's a reminder of something sacred. Self-respect is the foundation of every real connection. If you let others believe your boundaries are optional, your worth becomes negotiable. You must learn the art of distance, the coldness that protects warmth, not destroys it. Detachment doesn't mean you stop caring. It means you stop begging. You stop trying to convince people to see what they don't want to see. You stop offering explanations to those committed to misunderstanding you. You stop giving your energy to those who drain it without gratitude. Sometimes strength looks like silence. Sometimes it's walking away from someone who still calls your name. Sometimes it's deleting the message you want to send, because you know it's just another attempt to be seen by someone who refuses to look. The lion in you must learn to protect the fox, your innocence, your hope, your quiet heart. You can be both. You must be both. There is a kind of power that doesn't roar. It's not loud, not vengeful, not cruel. It's quiet clarity. It's waking up one morning and realizing you no longer need closure. It's seeing that person who once shattered you and feeling nothing. No hate, no longing, just peace. That's when you know you've detached. That's when you've reclaimed yourself. The world will call it coldness, but it's not. It's freedom. Because when you stop depending on others for validation, you become untouchable. People can leave, but they can't take your peace. They can lie, but they can't make you doubt your truth. You begin to see life not through the lens of need, but of choice. You no longer beg for love, you choose where to place it. The hardest lesson is this: not everyone deserves the softness you carry. Not everyone who reaches for you comes with good intentions. Some are drawn to your light because it makes them feel alive, even if they dim it to survive. You can't save them by sacrificing yourself. That's not love, that's self-erasure. Let them call you distant. Let them say you've changed. You have. You were never meant to stay small just to fit inside someone else's comfort. The person you're becoming, calm, clear, strong, will scare those who thrived on your confusion. That's okay. Growth isn't supposed to be liked. It's supposed to be real. So when they say you've grown cold, smile. You've simply stopped setting yourself on fire to keep others warm. That's not cruelty. That's wisdom. And as you sit there, perhaps still holding on to the memory of someone who made you doubt your worth, let go. Just a little. Breathe. Let the silence wrap around you. You're not broken. You're just learning what it means to finally belong to yourself. If these words echo something inside you, don't just listen. Reflect. Heal. Share them with someone who needs to hear that it's okay to let go. Because every time you speak your truth, you remind another soul that they're not alone. You believed kindness would protect you, but it made you invisible. You thought love meant patience, that waiting long enough would make someone see you, choose you, change for you. But they didn't. Because love doesn't awaken in the hearts of those who feed on your silence. It awakens in those who respect your boundaries. You learned too late that giving more doesn't make people stay. Sometimes, it only teaches them they can take without end. There's a quiet moment, the kind that doesn't come with tears. Only stillness, when you realize that the people you've been trying to save were never drowning. They were holding on to you to stay afloat, while you forgot how to breathe. You mistook their comfort for connection. You mistook your pain for purpose. But you are not anyone's lifeboat. You are the ocean, and you don't need to shrink yourself so others can learn to swim. It's strange, isn't it? How easily we mistake dependency for intimacy. How we confuse our aching need to be seen with love itself. We try to be the light in someone's darkness, only to discover they were never looking for light, they just didn't want to be alone. And so we stay, believing our empathy will heal them. But people don't change because you love them. They change when they decide to. And no amount of your softness can awaken a soul committed to its own blindness. You start to see it clearly once you've been hurt enough times, that most people don't want love. They want reassurance. They want to feel powerful, not present. They want to be adored, not understood. And when your love is deep and honest, it terrifies them. Because your sincerity demands reflection. And reflection is something few people are ready for. So you try to shrink your light to make it easier for them. You start speaking less, needing less, dimming your fire so they don't feel the heat of their own avoidance. But that's how you lose yourself, one compromise at a time. Until one day, you look in the mirror and realize the person staring back is tired of pretending that gentleness means weakness. You start to feel the faint pulse of something you buried long ago. Self-respect. Machiavelli wrote that fortune favors the bold. And he wasn't wrong. But boldness isn't just about action. Sometimes it's about absence. The courage to walk away. The bravery to stop explaining. The audacity to say, no more. Because every time you choose yourself, the world shifts a little. You stop orbiting around those who refuse to meet you halfway. You stop watering dead gardens. You start listening to your silence and finding it honest. Strength isn't always loud. Sometimes it's quiet, like deleting a message will reopen an old wound. Sometimes it's staying home instead of chasing someone who only calls when they're lonely. Sometimes it's choosing peace over answers. You learn to find power in restraint, not reaction. That's the cold psychology of freedom. Not cruelty, not arrogance, but clarity. And clarity, once tasted, ruins every illusion. You start to see that some people only loved you when you were losing yourself. You realize that your kindness was never the problem. It was your attachment to those who couldn't value it. The world teaches you to choose between love and self-respect. But the truth is, they're the same thing. Love that costs you your dignity is just fear wearing a mask. So here's a thought. Maybe it's time to stop romanticizing pain. Stop calling your suffering noble. Stop believing that loyalty to someone else is worth the betrayal of yourself. Real love doesn't demand your silence. Real connection doesn't ask you to become smaller. You've spent so long trying to be good that you forgot to be strong. But now, strength is calling you home. You don't need revenge. You don't need closure. You don't even need them to understand. You just need to let go. Completely. Detach not out of bitterness, but out of wisdom. Because when you finally walk away from what weakens you, life starts whispering something new, peace that doesn't depend on anyone else. Breathe deeply. You are not cold. You are healing. You are learning the language of calm after chaos. You are remembering that love was never meant to feel like begging. And if these words stir something in you, let them. Don't rush. Let the silence between them speak. Let it remind you that strength doesn't shout, it simply stands still. If this truth feels like yours, hold it close. And when you're ready, share it, not to prove anything, but to remind another soul that detachment isn't emptiness. It's rebirth. You thought love meant surrender until it left you empty. You gave and gave until you became a ghost in your own life, fading between the needs of others and the silence of your own soul. You told yourself that sacrifice was sacred, that being selfless made you pure. But purity means nothing when it costs you your peace. And what you called love was, in truth, an endless performance one, where you kept apologizing for existing too loudly, for feeling too deeply, for wanting too much. You used to believe that the world would recognize your heart if you just kept showing it. That if you stayed kind, stayed forgiving, stayed patient, life would eventually repay you. But kindness without boundaries becomes an open wound. Forgiveness without discernment becomes permission. And patience without direction becomes stagnation. The truth, the painful, liberating truth, is that people see only what benefits them. If your love makes their life easier, they'll take it. If your silence keeps the peace, they'll praise it. And if your forgiveness erases their guilt, they'll depend on it. Until one day, you realize you've become the background to your own story. That's when something begins to shift. Slowly, quietly, dangerously. You begin to feel anger not toward them, but toward yourself. For the times you stayed when you should have walked. For the words you swallowed just to be loved. For the parts of yourself you buried so others could feel comfortable. But anger, when met with truth, becomes clarity. And clarity, once it arrives, changes everything. You begin to see the world not as you wish it to be, but as it is. You start noticing patterns, how the people who claimed to love you were often the first to test you, how those who admired your light secretly resented it, and you stop making excuses for them. You stop saying, "They didn't mean it," and start saying, "I didn't deserve it." You start realizing that some people are meant to teach you lessons, not stay in your life, and that lesson that you cannot heal in the same place that broke you becomes the seed of your transformation. It hurts at first, detaching. Your heart will fight it. It will whisper that maybe they'll change, maybe this time will be different, maybe the story isn't over. But listen closely, that voice isn't hope. It's fear. Fear of being alone. Fear of starting over. Fear that without them, you won't know who you are. Yet, the moment you stop chasing what's gone, something miraculous happens. You meet yourself again. You remember what it feels like to laugh without looking for permission, to rest without guilt, to dream without needing validation. You remember that peace doesn't have to be earned, it's your birthright. And you begin to understand Machiavelli's quiet truth, that power isn't dominance, it's self-command. It's the art of being both lion and fox, brave enough to act, wise enough to wait. You no longer seek control over others. You seek mastery over your own emotions. That is real strength. That is real freedom. The illusion of goodness shatters, and you finally see it was never about being good or bad. It was about being real. And reality, though harsh, is merciful. Because once you see people as they are, not as you wish them to be, they lose their power to hurt you. The masks fall away. You no longer fall for potential. You respond to truth. You no longer chase fantasy. You honor what's in front of you. You stop asking, "Why did they do this to me?" and start asking, "Why did I allow it for so long?" That shift, quiet, internal, irreversible, marks the beginning of wisdom. You begin walking lighter, speaking less, listening more. You stop explaining your worth. You stop defending your heart. And in that silence, you rediscover a version of yourself untouched by disappointment, strong, calm, steady. The kind of strength that doesn't need validation because it stands on its own. The world may call it detachment, but it's not. It's alignment. You're no longer running toward or away, you're simply standing where truth lives. You've become both observer and participant, both dreamer and realist. You've learned that love without clarity is blindness, and now your eyes are open. If your heart feels raw as you hear this, that's okay. Healing is not gentle, it's honest. And honesty will always ask for something, your illusions. Let them go. You won't need them where you're going. And if these words find you in the middle of your own unraveling, take them as a sign, not that you've failed, but that you're finally awake. Share them if they speak your truth. Someone out there is still where you were trying to love their way out of pain. They need to know there's another way. There's a moment in every awakening when the silence feels unbearable. You've detached from the noise, from the chaos, from the people who drained you, but now, the quiet echoes. It's strange, isn't it? You longed for peace, and when it arrived, it felt like loneliness. That's the final trick of attachment. It makes you believe that emptiness means loss, when in truth, it means space. Space for yourself. Space for new truth to grow. You used to measure your worth by how much you were needed. The messages, the attention, the affection, they fed something inside you. Something you mistook for love. But love that requires constant proof isn't love. It's insecurity in disguise. You see that now. You see how you kept pouring from a cup that never refilled, hoping that someone someday would pour back. But life doesn't reward the ones who wait for permission to live. It rewards the ones who dare to stop waiting. Detachment is not about turning cold. It's about turning inward. It's learning to sit with yourself without needing anyone else to fill the silence. It's trusting that your company is enough, that your thoughts, even the heavy ones, are worth hearing, that your own presence can be a safe place. You start realizing that the peace you once sought in others was always waiting inside you, hidden beneath the noise of longing. Machiavelli wrote about the necessity of strength, about being both lion and fox. Most misunderstand those words, thinking they mean manipulation or domination. But what if they were really about balance, about knowing when to roar and when to move in silence? To be a lion is to defend your soul fiercely. To be a fox is to protect it wisely. The lion says, "I will not be disrespected." The fox whispers, "I don't need to prove that I'm strong." Together, they create a heart that is neither naive nor bitter, but awake. You start to see the world differently when you stop needing it to be kind. You stop expecting fairness. You stop searching for justice in people who can't even be honest with themselves. And strangely, that's where your compassion deepens, not for them, but for yourself. You forgive yourself for not knowing better, for trying too hard, for staying too long. You understand now that it was never weakness. It was hope. But hope, when misplaced, becomes a chain, and you are finally learning how to break it. There's beauty in this kind of solitude, a softness that doesn't depend on anyone's approval. You find new rituals, morning silence, late-night journaling, long walks where you finally listen to your own heartbeat. You begin to dream again, not of them, not of what was, but of who you could become. If you stopped carrying everyone else's weight, you start to smile without forcing it. You start to trust that your future isn't behind you. You start to believe that peace can stay. And then, life begins to test you. It always does. The past will return in familiar shapes. A message you thought you'd never get again. A memory that whispers, "Remember me?" You'll feel the pull, the temptation to reopen what hurt you, to rewrite the story with a better ending. But that's when your strength will reveal itself, not in resistance, but in clarity. You'll see that you don't need to go back, because you're no longer the same person who left. You'll smile, maybe even feel tenderness, but you won't reach out. That's not coldness. That's mastery. Self-respect, you'll realize, isn't loud. It's the quiet refusal to return to what breaks you. It's the soft "no" whispered under your breath when your heart starts to ache for what you've already outgrown. It's the way you protect your peace like sacred ground, no longer trading it for moments of validation. It's choosing clarity over illusion, truth over fantasy every single time. And one day, you'll look back and understand that the coldness you feared was never the enemy. It was the medicine, the cooling of a fever that once burned with desperation, the calm that comes after the storm, the proof that you've survived, not because the world became kinder, but because you became real. So breathe deeply. You've earned this stillness. You've walked through fire and came out unashamed. The world may not understand your silence, but your soul does. And if someone asks why you've changed, you can simply say, "I stopped confusing love with suffering." If these words feel like a mirror, if you see your reflection somewhere between them, honor that. Share it, not because it's pretty, but because it's true. Someone out there is still fighting the battle you've already won. Let your calm be their reminder that freedom doesn't always roar. Sometimes it whispers. You've spent years chasing love, chasing peace, chasing meaning as if they lived somewhere outside of you. But the truth is simpler, quieter. Everything you were searching for was waiting in the stillness you once feared. The world will keep spinning. People will come and go. But the strength you've found, the one built from pain and clarity, will never leave you. You've learned that detachment isn't the death of love. It's the rebirth of dignity. It's seeing clearly without resentment, walking away without bitterness, loving without losing yourself. And maybe that's what Machiavelli meant all along. That power isn't about control. It's about presence. It's about standing tall in your truth, even when your voice shakes. It's about knowing you can be soft without being small, kind without being naive, loving without being used. You've become both the lion and the fox, fierce enough to guard your heart, wise enough to know when to walk away. So if you're still healing, take your time. Don't rush to fill the silence. Let it teach you. Let it remind you that strength doesn't mean hardness, it means wholeness. And when you finally feel peace settling in your bones, you'll realize it's not that the world changed, it's that you did. You stopped waiting to be saved, and became your own protector. If these words touched something in you, let them linger. Share them softly with someone who needs light in their darkness. Subscribe, like, or comment not out of habit, but because truth deserves to be echoed. You are not cold. You are clear. And clarity is love in its highest form.